What if the fall of the Kuru Empire did not begin on the battlefield, but in a court where one humiliated woman stood surrounded by silent power and one enraged warrior made promises no kingdom could survive? Bhima's vows are often remembered as bursts of fury, but in the Mahabharata they become something much larger, a countdown to dynastic ruin. That is why this story matters. Bhima is not the calm philosopher of the epic, and he is not pretending to be. He is appetite, force, memory, and blunt justice. When he vows destruction, the epic forces us to ask a dangerous question: was Bhima merely losing control, or was he saying out loud what a corrupted court had already made inevitable? The deeper shock is that Bhima's rage grows inside a room full of people who already know right from wrong. Draupadi's question exposes them. Bhishma hesitates. Dhritarashtra delays. The court still wants order without courage. And in that vacuum, Bhima's vow stops sounding like private revenge. It starts sounding like judgment filling the space abandoned by authority. From this moment forward, Bhima's memory becomes political. He will remember Dushasana's violence. He will remember Duryodhana's obscene gesture. He will remember every elder who allowed the line to be crossed. The Mahabharata does not treat those oaths as decorative drama. It treats them as emotional weapons carried across years until war gives them their hour. So the real question is not whether Bhima was angry. Of course he was. The real question is why his anger becomes one of the clearest engines of the entire war. To understand that, we have to return to the dice hall, the vows themselves, and the terrifying fact that some promises do not calm a broken kingdom. They finish breaking it. The dice hall is not just a bad decision. It is a system revealing its true character. Shakuni weaponizes skill and deceit. Yudhishthira keeps playing beyond reason. The court watches legality become a mask for moral collapse. By the time Draupadi is dragged into the assembly, everyone can see that the Kuru house is no longer protecting Dharma. It is staging its own disgrace. Then comes the wound Bhima never forgets. Draupadi is treated not as queen, not as person, but as spoil. Dushasana lays violent hands on her. The assembly becomes a theater of stripped dignity. At that instant Bhima is no longer just a brother watching insult. He becomes the keeper of a debt the kingdom itself refuses to repay. Duryodhana makes it worse by turning humiliation into mockery. His gesture toward his thigh is not a random insult. It is a declaration that power now feels untouchable. Bhima answers with a vow that sounds primitive on the surface: one day he will smash that thigh. But inside the epic, the promise means something wider. Arrogance has just written its own sentence. He vows even more against Dushasana. The language is brutal because the injury is not symbolic anymore. A boundary of civilization has been crossed. Bhima's promise to tear open Dushasana is terrible, but the Mahabharata wants us to feel why terrible language erupts here. Soft outrage would be dishonest. The court has manufactured a response as extreme as its own crime. And that is the turning point. Bhima's vows are not born in ordinary rivalry. They are born in a public collapse where the law fails, the elders fail, and dignity is preserved only by divine intervention and human memory. From then on, every future battle carries the dice hall inside it. Kurukshetra will not simply settle a succession dispute. It will answer an old humiliation. Exile could have diluted Bhima's fury. Instead it preserves it. Years pass, but the memory does not fade into noble abstraction. Bhima carries the dice hall like an inner battlefield. That matters because the epic distinguishes him from characters who rationalize endlessly. Bhima remembers with the body. Hunger, fatigue, insult, and love all keep the wound alive. This is why Bhima is so important inside the Pandava family. Yudhishthira leans toward patience and principle. Arjuna can be torn between conscience and duty. Bhima keeps asking the question others postpone: how long can a righteous man wait before waiting becomes surrender? His vows keep the moral emergency visible when diplomacy and habit would prefer softer language. Krishna understands this power. He knows Bhima is not subtle, but he also knows Bhima cannot be bribed into forgetting. In a world full of half measures, that reliability matters. The same man who can seem ruled by appetite is also the one least likely to sentimentalize evil. Bhima's vows become strategic because they guarantee that some crimes will remain non-negotiable. Meanwhile, Duryodhana mistakes delay for victory. The Kaurava camp reads exile as weakness, not as compression. That is a fatal misreading. Bhima's vows are quiet during these years, but they are not dead. They are accumulating force. Every failed compromise, every refused settlement, every new display of arrogance moves the Kuru house closer to the moment when memory becomes action. So by the time Kurukshetra begins, Bhima is not entering a fresh conflict. He is entering the execution stage of promises made years earlier. That is what makes his presence so frightening. Others can still debate tactics. Bhima already knows which debts must be collected. The war will test whether vengeance can ever serve justice, but it will not erase the need for reckoning. On the battlefield, Bhima is not elegant, and the epic does not want him to be. He is impact. He is accumulation. He is the physical return of every insult the Kauravas treated as safely past. When he fights, the war stops being abstract strategy and becomes moral memory with muscles. That is why even before the final duels, Bhima already feels like the Kuru dynasty's approaching collapse. Then one of the great vows is fulfilled. Bhima reaches Dushasana and destroys him with a ferocity that shocks even within an already brutal war. Readers often recoil here, and they should. The Mahabharata does not sanitize vengeance once it is finally unleashed. But it also refuses to separate that violence from the original outrage that made such a vow conceivable in the first place. That fulfillment matters not because brutality is glorious, but because the epic is asking what happens when justice is postponed until only brutality seems capable of expressing it. Bhima's act is both answer and indictment. It answers the dice hall. It also indicts the entire political order that allowed justice to ripen this late, in this shape, on this field. The duel with Duryodhana carries the same tension. Everyone knows the rules of mace combat. Everyone also knows Duryodhana's earlier crime. When Bhima finally strikes the thigh he had sworn to break, the blow lands on more than a body. It lands on the memory of that court gesture, on years of arrogance, and on the illusion that technical legality can erase moral corruption. And that is when Bhima's vows stop being prediction and become history. Dushasana is gone. Duryodhana is broken. The empire that once looked invincible lies in pieces. Yet the feeling is not clean triumph. The Mahabharata insists on that discomfort. Bhima has done what he promised, but every fulfilled vow reveals how much the world had to rot before fulfillment became possible. So how did Bhima's vows break an empire? Not because one strong man can destroy a kingdom alone. They broke an empire because they exposed what the empire had already become. A just court would never have created those vows. A courageous kingship would never have needed them. Bhima's rage becomes decisive only after authority repeatedly refuses to punish evil when it is still small. This is also why Bhima matters among the Pandavas. He is the one who refuses the comforting lie that patience always remains pure. Sometimes delayed justice mutates into vengeance because too many wiser people postponed action for too long. Bhima is dangerous, but his danger is diagnostic. He reveals what polite morality looks like after it has failed to protect the innocent. The final lesson is severe. Personal vows become political earthquakes when institutions abandon the work they were built to do. Bhima did not invent the Kuru disaster. He became its instrument of reckoning. And that is why his story still feels modern. When truth is delayed, force does not disappear. It waits, hardens, and eventually demands a far more terrible price. And once Bhima's vows are understood this way, another painful question follows naturally. What other delayed truths helped make this war unstoppable? One of the sharpest lies by silence belongs to Kunti, whose secret about Karna comes far too late to prevent catastrophe. That next chapter reveals how guilt can shape destiny as powerfully as rage. So remember Bhima's vows as more than revenge. They were the sound a dying empire made when justice failed too early and too often. If this episode helped you see the Mahabharata more deeply, like this video, subscribe to EkalavyaLearn, and turn on the bell icon to get new videos on time. Next, Kunti's secret before the war reveals how one hidden truth deepened the tragedy even further.